Tim Abbott from Showbox Sires is back with me today for the second part of our Showbox stories from World Dairy Expo, and today we open up the stories of three more dairy greats, Jim Ostrom and John Vosters from Milk Source, as well as Steve Briggs from Brigeen Farms. Sit down on your Showbox and join us today as we reminisce here on the Up Level Dairy Podcast.
Well, Peggy, we're continuing our interview series with a couple great guys, and I'm going to let you introduce our next session.
Oh, and what an honor and a privilege to introduce two gentlemen that I am personally friends with and also get to admire so much in the work they do with Milk Source and specifically Milk Source Genetics here at World Dairy Expo. We are joined by Mr. Jim Ostrom and John Vosters. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And so Jim, I'm going to start with you. I heard you state the other day, don't you love it when I use your words back on you, that you like to ask people, what's your expo? And so, Jim, what's expo to you? What's your expo?
Well, so it's a good story. I started out coming to expo at age 16, and I got here for about 10 minutes, and I just had witnessed a Grand Champion Ayrshire show. And I'm not an Ayrshire fan, but I was just moved by it, and Expo was something I was going to be a part of for the rest of my life. I just knew it that day. It's an amazing place, right? But everybody's got a different story, and right now we're exhibitors here at the show. And at one point I was a commercial exhibitor, and a commercial exhibitor I have been, but I was also a commercial exhibits manager. So everybody's got a different experience, and whether it's showing cattle or competing in collegiate contests or commercial exhibitors or networking with friends. But everybody's very passionate about being here.
Okay, Jim, did you tell me one time, did you used to sell some sort of cow art here?
I did.
Okay.
It was one of the first businesses I started. It wasn't very good business.
Okay, go into detail though.
Luckily he got into cows.
Actually, I had cow art, and it was a big seller, but not a big profit.
Did you make the art?
No. I contracted it. I had somebody do it for us.
So this was the early
Thanks
business
for bringing that
skills
up.
Development. Early skills development.
My first business card.
Management.
Yeah.
Was it really?
Yeah.
What was it called?
It was called the Maven Group.
The Maven
Yeah.
Group. Can we still find this
No,
online?
you
Where
cannot.
are the relics? Collector's items.
Actually,
collector's items.
Actually, Pete Giacomini, I had heard this rumor that he sold a Brookview Tony charity sculpture, and I'm the guy that contacted with the sculptor to make them, and they were numbered edition Brookview Tony charity sculptures.
Stop.
And I sold about 250 of those.
Really?
You did?
I did.
I think I have one of my prized possessions is Pete Heffering's Brookview Tony Charity painted model.
Yeah,
so
that's
it might have come from you.
I handmade
guys
that.
know this?
I
did not
hand
know
carved that. Yeah, and I put the numbers on the bottom. There's a number. I think this was number one.
I don't think it's probably not even his.
Oh.
No, but he gave it.
Oh, he gave it to you?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
got it from Pete. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
So it was not a failure, Jim.
Well,
Yeah, look at that.
economically speaking.
Yes.
Business, this is go back to how do we define success in business?
Yeah, right.
And okay, so I'm going over to you, John. What is your expo? What's expo to you?
Well, so I've only probably been last 20 years coming to Expo. Started out as a big fan as we were just getting started. And then it's been such a blast at the old barns to start out, and the gatherings kind of outside the barn because there wasn't room in the barn for the big groups of people. And it's just been a great progression, and we've gotten better cattle and then had some success and got to celebrate that success.
Yeah, you've had some very incredible successes, and we'll hear more about that soon, I'm sure. But the theme of our conversations that Tim and I want to bring forth today is all about the Showbox, and these show boxes that have been a part of our past and a part of the future for so many. If your old Showbox could talk, what's one story it would tell?
I'm not telling any of those stories.
You have no PG stories from your Showbox, Jim?
I will tell you a story of a disaster averted. So many people know we have a very elaborate display, and I got in my brain one year that I was going to have a 2-story display. I was just going to put a second story up there, and we're going to have a great place to have socials, like a conversation like this. And I went out and tried to hire an engineer to tell me it'd be okay. And I couldn't get one to stamp it. And they're like, no, because if you get too many people up there, it's going to come down. It's going to be a disaster, of course. And I finally, after months of trying to do this, I just stopped. And it was the year that we won 3 champions.
No.
And if we'd have had a second story, that thing would have come down.
It would have come down.
Because people were having so much fun. There was hundreds of people. So that's my Showbox story.
I'm going to interrupt here for a second, Peggy, because he's given us 2 ideas he says weren't good. His art, which wasn't terrible, but Jim, I will agree, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, it was a terrible idea.
I'm with the engineer. That's a horrible idea.
Okay, John, Showbox story. Do you have one from here or even from when you were a kid or showing with your
Well,
girls over the years?
I'm grateful that our showboxes cannot see or hear because, there were some pretty wild celebrations going on. And there was probably the incidents that didn't pass the safety either with people dancing on the showboxes because they're not short. People make their way up there, and I won't name any names, but yeah, if they could see or hear or remember that, it might not be great for us today. Yeah.
Is there a song that typically would end up with your friends celebrating in those dance parties? Is there a celebratory song for you guys?
There's a few songs that have been. Purple Rain is probably the most popular one. Yeah. Jolene, that one plays a little bit, and now we got something by the Dixie Chicks is popular now that Dixie's made her name.
Oh, so much fun! So much fun.
Well, guys, I'm going to ask each of you, we're going to skip ahead. In the dairy industry, you guys are involved in every facet. So, John, I'll start with you. Tell me, in your history, is there an event or a breakthrough in dairy that you think is the most influential thing that's happened? Maybe they'll be the same, maybe they'll be different, but I'd be curious, in your mind, what's happened in this industry?
So for us, in particular in Milk Source, like I grew up in a stanchion barn with my dad in a 100-cow stanchion barn. Now we have 100-stall parlors. So when we built our first parlor, it was a double 12 and we milked 600 cows. And I didn't think as big as Jim did. I thought, hey, this can be my career. This would be great. And thankfully, Jim had the foresight, and I actually remember the conversation really well. This was in the late 90s. And he's like, we can't stay like this. We have to improve. We have to get better. And we did. And then thankfully through really good employees, we were able to expand further. And it's been a blessing. And it's helped support our cause in showing cattle pretty substantially by being good dairymen.
Well, and truly that's what everybody here should aspire to be. I mean, we're all dairymen at some level, and what you guys have done is taken it to the next level. Jim, is there something in your career that really sticks out?
Well, I'll tell you, an event that happened to me. When I was here at World Dairy Expo as commercial exhibits manager, part of my job is we went to the Tulare Farm Show. And I saw a 1,000 cow dairy, and I was blown away. I could not believe it. And I came back and I started sketching out little business plans for a 1,000 cow dairy, and I had no idea how to do it. But in tangent to that, I think at the same time, the curtain sidewall freestall barn was sort of being perfected to an acceptable level, and that made it possible to make cows comfortable free stalls instead of concrete beds. They were sand beds and open ventilation, and lo and behold, we could do that here in a cold climate in Wisconsin. And there was a few other producers at that time that were doing it, and we could see it firsthand. And that was kind of our beginning.
Wow.
It kind of transformed Wisconsin, really. I mean,
Sure.
Wisconsin was stanchion barns until that finally came along, and it allowed us to compete with the rest of the country, really, with the Western dairy producers that were big and efficient already.
Oh, so I got to ask you, John. So when Jim came back from California and started sketching out these business plans for 1,000 cows, 10 times the number of cows that you're milking in the stanchion barn.
Right, yeah.
What was your first? Do you remember your first reaction?
So I remember having several reactions when he would propose bigger operations and stuff, and there was the uneasiness to change, the little bit of apprehension, but once we rolled into it, like we were full go, and it's been a great ride. Yeah.
Can one of you fill us in? Not all of our listeners would know the scope of Milk Source, and I know we don't have a long time to do that. Can one of you give us a Reader's Digest version of what Milk Source is today?
Sure, I'll do that. We have 5 larger dairy farms And what most people don't realize is we have 2 of the largest goat farms that anybody's ever heard of. We milk goats. And as far as I can tell, they give about this much milk.
Okay. But if you have a lot of them giving this much milk, it's a
still
lot of milk.
not a lot of milk. But we have a goat cheese brand called LeClaire, and it is growing wonderfully. And across the country, stores are adopting LeClaire Family Creamery. And it's because of the freshness of our goat cheese. And it's a very flavorful cheese, and we really can't make enough of it.
And can I interject there?
Sure.
You're nice enough to send me some for Christmas, so keep that in your head. But I'm not a goat cheese fan, and it's the best cheese I've ever had.
And it's because of that fresh milk.
That's right. I would rival it versus any dairy cheese I've ever had. So
fresh
sorry
milk.
to interrupt, but it's important.
Yeah. So we have a small Italian cheese business. In the scale of cheese, we're tiny. But we tried integration, and we continue to work at it.
Yeah, and I would add that anybody that hasn't tried a flavored Chev cheese on their salad, they don't know what they're missing.
So it's really good.
It's a game changer. It really is. It's a good dressing.
So Peggy, we're making progress here, but the one thing, you have some dairy cows too. Do you want to mention them?
No.
So we've got Milk Source Genetics, which a lot of people know about, the brands of goat milk or of goat cheese I just mentioned, and then there's Milk Source and the multi-site dairies that are part of that.
Yeah, and multi-site dairying it was a steeper learning curve than I care to admit. Being really great in one site is, generally speaking, a lot easier than being good to great in other sites. And I remember very specifically John Todd, we didn't mention Todd, he's a business partner for almost 30 years. And we had a meeting where we realized that we weren't part of all the day-to-day decisions anymore. And so you have to really start to win through culture and start to influence people's decisions through culture. And that multi-site has its challenges.
But Peggy, we're talking about tidbits of information for our listeners. Right there, one of the hardest things any of us can do in business is relinquish control. And you can't do what you do at Milk Source, John, if you don't relinquish control to good people.
Yeah, so I encourage our guys that are managers out at the site. Jim talked about culture. It's such a big deal, but we have to teach employees the why behind the what. And then it's a really big deal that the manager doesn't try to carry the whole load, or I say he can't keep all the balls in the air. Somebody's got to help him, and if he tries to do too much, they will hand off. Anybody will relinquish decision making to the person that'll make them, but he has to hand it back to them and say, no, let's talk about why we make the decision and how it's important, and then they can make decisions. And it's so key, because if you hear someone say, I had to work until 9 o'clock and I worked such long days and everything, like, they're not doing it right. They're not handing off decision making and teaching and growing people.
And so you just talked about, John, the importance of the why and helping your employees and your team be able to bring that into the culture. But I want to couple that with the Milk Source way. And this is ingrained in the culture of Milk Source. So just share for a moment a little bit about the Milk Source way, what that means, and how you've really built that in to your managers and to the teams that are part of the multi-site dairies and the other entities that are part of Milk Source.
So the Milk Source way of the day is what we call it. There's 30 cultural traits or behaviors that we aspire to. Some people may say, well, what do you mean 30? And one is animal care, the other one might be safety, another one might be respect, and there's 30 of them. And some people may say, well, you're trying to force culture down my throat, perhaps, if I'm a negative thinking person. The truth is I look at our 30 Milk Source ways of the day as traits and behaviors that I want to focus on. And I want to improve in. And some I'm solid in, and others I need to work on. And it's helpful, and all it is a friendly reminder to us all of things that we think are valuable to us and important. And I think culture is a decision. It's like a strong family culture versus a weak one. We are choosing to try to live by healthy behaviors.
Great advice, Peggy. So much good information. And it leads me to my next couple questions. You know, truly you guys are iconic and you are mentors to many of us. We just met with two guys that even in their 70s are saying how they're learning from young people, how they're learning from everybody around them. You guys just said that. Tell us each, John, let's start with you, about a couple mentors that, whether they're younger than you, older than you, I know you could do dozens, but give us a couple.
Well, I would start out by recognizing my dad, Ted. Like, I grew up on the family farm, and I feel like he taught me the right way to do things, gave me a business sense on how that's very important. We talk about sustainability, but you have to be good. You have to be profitable to sustain. So I think he ingrained that in me. And then I would say Jim and Todd, for me, like, we were young when we started, but I learned a lot from both of them. They've been really instrumental. And then I would take it to the show business side. We've had a lot of great leaders on the show cattle side, from Tim Natsky, Jamie Envik, and now Mandy and Eddie Bew, Joel Keatsman, Ryan Crollo. Like, there's been a lot of people in the industry that are just great teachers. And we try to learn as much as we can. And I'm probably to the point now that I have people that work underneath me that I'm learning stuff from, because they've taken it to the next step, and they have that passion, and they have a small area of focus, and they still can teach you stuff today. So that's really cool.
One takeaway message for me in this is our mentors don't always have to be older. We think mentors are supposed to be older. They don't need to be older. Everybody we've talked to today has said that. So Jim, tell us about your mentors.
Well, I'm going to talk about one individual, and it was somebody that affected me going into the dairy business, and it is Lloyd Holterman, senior and junior. So it's but junior in particular because he inspired me. He's a local dairyman where I grew up, and he's obviously known around the country as a great breeder of dairy cattle. And the first farm I worked on had 13 cows, and then I got to work on Lloyd's farm when I got a driver's license, because I could get there, and I got to milk cows for that family farm. And at that time they might have had 100 cows, but they were really great genetics, really great family farm. And I milked cows on their third shift through high school, and I just fell in love with the business.
That's great. Well, now we know to thank Lloyd for all this success.
Yes, and how cool is it that you get to be someone else's Lloyd, right? Yeah. Like, as much as you had those mentors, there are others that look to the two of you and look at you in that same light. And I have to follow it up with a funny story, right? So in my spare time, Tim, you don't know this about me, but I coach Dairy Quiz Bowl, right? So that's my favorite competitive sport. And one day I was quizzing my team a few years back on who is the father of the dairy industry, who's known as the father of the modern dairy industry. And the correct answer would be W.D. Hoard.
Yeah.
However, the kids that I was coaching, they buzzed in their little buzzers, and I said, yeah, who is it? And they go, Jim Ostrom.
W.D. Hoard's not happy with it.
So as much as you have those mentors, both of you and what you're doing, the impact is writing its own page of history as fathers of the modern dairy industry that we know today and that others will be looking at for years to come.
So a couple other quick questions back to the Showbox. Let's sit back on the Showbox to wrap this up. Favorite cow of all time, Jim?
Well, it's one that we own, Muskie Ayatollah Martha. Okay. What a wonderful, wonderful cow. She may never be surpassed. Just truly a unbelievable Jersey cow. One
of the most wonderful combinations of dairy and strength and udders going. John?
Well, we've had a bunch of really good red cows. Probably among my favorites is Snapple, because of the lineage that she comes from and the daughters that she's had, and she's produced some good animals for us as well. So yeah, we could go on a long time about the red cows that we have. Martha, obviously, and the story behind Martha, and then Annette being at the halter of Martha was another really, they're an iconic pair, and we'll never be able to forget that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, part of that legacy, it's like Heffering and Charity. Mm-hmm. It was Annette and Martha, and that's powerful, because we do build ourselves around these cows.
Sure do. Yes, and with that, With that, any other questions that you wanted to ping off of these two today?
I would love to ask them questions forever, but Peggy, I'm going to let you give a wrap and let these guys give maybe each of them a little bit of time just to wrap up to our listeners, but I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, all right. And so Jim and John, in our last few minutes that we have with you today, this is open mic. What's the one thing on your heart to share to our other dairy producers out there that are listening?
So what I try to live by in business is that you have to be willing to break paradigms almost every day. You have to throw away the status quo, and you have to try to reinvent how you do things, how you do work, how you think about the future. And there's some examples in our industry. The freestall barn was one of them, open-sided freestall barn. But on the food side, on the dairy food side, if you'd have told anybody in the yogurt business that is a brand called Chobani was going to have any impact whatsoever, they'd have all said no. It'd have been unanimous. There's no room. It's owned by multinationals. There's no room. And Chobani was a fabulous, and still is a fabulous success story for our industry that sold a lot of product and created billions of dollars worth of value for the dairy producer. And another one is Select Milk coming out with Fairlife. So fluid milk was a declining category, and they take a little bit of sugar out of it and fortify some protein with its own natural protein, and it turns into this super price point product with a great growth potential and turns into multi-billions of dollars. And those are two examples where the paradigm was there's no room for new innovation and there's no room for a new brand, and they turned it upside down. And the same thing can be true in dairy, in milk cows, and that we have to constantly be a little uncomfortable about what's going on and how we can compete in the future.
Great.
Oh, so good. So good. And John?
So, to echo that same thing that Jim said, there is a better way to do it, and we got to figure out what that is. And that can be through genetics, that cattle are just healthier. Like, that's a huge part of it. But it can be how we treat cattle, how we house them. All the things that'll make them healthier will make them live longer, and that'll make them more profitable for us. So there is a better way. We got to keep striving to figure it out. And then the other part that I'll say is, like, we're a people-driven business, and the people have been so core to our success, our growth. Anything that we've been able to do, it's been great people in our company, and we got to keep focusing on them, and we have to get them to have that same understanding of the people underneath them. Like, the more you focus on them, the more you appreciate them and what they do, the better they're going to do for you, and that'll be the next step for them. So, yeah.
Very good. Thank you for sharing those last pieces of wisdom from here on the Showbox today with us. John Vosters, Jim Ostrom, thanks again for jumping on with Tim and I here at World Dairy Expo.
And guys, I'm going to be done this in a little bit. Can you go get your Showbox ready? I'll be right down.
We'll be there. Thank you.
That was marvelous.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
That was unbelievable. Thank you.
You just heard from John Vosters and Jim Ostrom with Milk Source. And now we switch our conversation over to welcome Steve Briggs from Brigeen Farms in Maine. And Steve is going to tell us about some of his favorite stories from his Showbox.
Well, Peggy, we're here with another interview at World Dairy Expo for the Up Level podcast and Showbox Sires series, interviewing iconic people about their passion for the business. And Peggy, this one's special for me because one of my New England mentors is here at the table with me, Steve Briggs from Brigeen Farm in Turner, Maine. Being a kid growing up in Vermont and watching the top level people in the business, you learn from them. And so, Steve, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
So, Steve, tell us a little bit about your history in the business. How long have you been in it? Give us a few highlights of what you've done. We'd love to hear them.
Well, my dad was fortunate to be good friends with Pete Heffring, so I got to be Pete's friend and worker early on. Came to the first World Dairy Expo with him. That was back when fitters slept in the barn with the cows and took showers in the basement of the Coliseum. Not the $200 a day motel rooms.
Or more.
But I have always enjoyed the challenge of taking a group of cows and seeing how you can change them in 7 days of really intensive care. It's mind-blowing, and I still get a thrill out of it.
So how many years have you done this? You would have gone to your first shows at what age?
12.
Yeah, and now you're several years older.
Old enough to know better.
Yeah, so you've been to a few of these shows, including you have some pretty early memories of World Dairy Expo and its origins too. And I bet, keeping in the theme of our conversations today with showboxes, I bet you have a showbox that's pretty special to you and your family too. Is there one that comes to mind?
There are so many special experiences on so many different showboxes. One of the best ones for me was my daughter Betsy runs a farm now. She was a freshman at Cornell. And this was back when they started the Grand National Junior Show at Louisville. We had a yearling that I purchased in the spring, and we played with her all summer, and Betsy got to show her. Well, she flew down to Louisville on Saturday, fitted the heifer for the show on Sunday, and she won and was junior champion.
Oh,
And that was a thrill.
that's a pretty special
That's
one.
a great thrill. That's it. And that one of, Peggy, I'm just going to go right to it here. Steve, one of the things that you will go down in history is you're an incredible teacher of youth. I watched you, Peggy, they just had a sale at Brigeen this summer, and Steve and Betsy didn't hire the normal fitting crew. No. They hired a bunch of young people. Why would you do that? That's too much risk.
No, it's not. The most satisfying thing in the world is to teach young people who want to learn. And we had Joan Coyne, who was manager of the crew, and they were all young kids, no egos, a lot of talent, a lot of enthusiasm, and she kept them all headed in the right direction. We had a great sale. The cattle were presented beautifully.
And I do this, in the sales business. I have a sale, that I run 6 times a year, and I will tell Steve, I've told you this, but cattle were never better prepared than by this group of young people. And Peggy, think about what they learned. They are the next level up of what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the business is so different now because we don't have that many sales to train people. To be a good clipper, you have to clip at least 1,000 head, at least. And but they learn to be part of a team, that it's all right to work hard, to sweat your ass off, and you can still have fun doing it.
Oh, it's so good. What an incredible opportunity that you gave those youth. And that will be one that will impact them beyond and impact this industry because of your willingness to open your doors for that.
Well, and Steve, I want to go back just a little bit about some of your history showing cows. So let's talk a little bit about some of your favorite shows that you've ever been to, some of the favorite cows you've worked with.
Oh, the favorite show has to be World Dairy Expo because it is the top. It's the greatest show in the world, both for cows and for people that like to present them. So if you come here and do well, it's quite a high.
What is it? You've been one of the great preparers of cattle, and you said something I want our listeners to hear. You get intensive care for 7 days. It's like they're in an intensive care unit in the hospital. And what's the most important 2 or 3 things that goes on when Steve Briggs takes over a show string? What happens?
You have to know cows well enough to learn about each individual. What she likes, what she doesn't like, the kind of hay she likes. The most important thing about having a cow look good is to get her full, not just show day, but the week up to the show. You need at least 4 different kinds of hay because they're like everything else, they get bored. It's, to learn about cows and their behavior, it's a good challenge. I get a high out of it.
And I watch you, Steve, and I've watched this for the 30 years I've known him, Peggy. he's maybe more passionate about it today than he was 30 years ago, which is amazing.
There are some other passions I can enjoy now.
So, in the theme of the Showbox stories that Tim and I are bringing to the greater dairy industry through this effort here, Steve, if your old Showbox could talk, what's the story it would tell?
Oh, I don't know. Work hard, enjoy life, treat everyone with respect the way you'd like to be treated.
All words we all live by, right? Or
Absolutely.
we need to.
Absolutely. And so that's what you keep tucked in that Showbox, are those words of wisdom, huh? Yeah, and those are some good ones. Very good.
So you've been involved with a lot of great cows, great bulls, great people. Tell us, who's the most influential cow in Steve Briggs's career in this business?
Well, Convincer Rhonda would have to be the most influential of our herd. She made 60,000 back when that was unheard of. Milked 200 pounds a day when we didn't believe it. And she bred on well. As far as bulls, I think probably Golden was the most influential sire I can think of. He put the udders on. Some people blame the ultrasound, but I don't. I think it's the bulls that made the udders good enough.
And Steve, do you think today, you've watched this, how do we compare today coming to a show versus 10 years ago, 20, 30? Give us a little walk down memory lane and how have cows changed?
Oh my. They're so much better, it's mind-blowing. To me.
In what way?
Yeah, in what way?
They're bigger, stronger, their udders are better. These young cows out here have so much width in their udder, they can milk 140 pounds a day and not pull it away. This show is going to be unreal.
And speaking of showing and your rich history and heritage that you and your family have, in this show ring that is right behind us in the Coliseum and in show rings all over the place, what's your favorite memory of showing cows? If you could just pick one.
Well, we had a senior yearling one year that we sent out here. And I had sent heifers out before that weren't quite good enough. But this one was good enough. And in the first pull, we were in first place. And I was showing her. But the associate judge wanted the judge to take another look. So he led the first three out around in a small circle, and I don't think I drew back that whole circle.
And what happened?
Oh, he left them the way they were.
He did.
The things we remember, huh? The things you never forget, I should
That's
say.
right.
Oh.
Well, Steve, as we could talk forever about so many different topics. One of my greatest admirations of you, first time I was at Brigeen Farm, you had a little tie stall barn with fluffy-tailed cows, and you looked after them like they're all in the show. And you go to Brigeen Farm today, and it's one of the top producing commercial herds in New England. Tell me what happened.
Well, my daughter and her husband came home in 2000. We were a 60-cow tie stall barn. They knew we needed to milk a lot more cows to support two families, and they wanted kids, so we expanded. We started by swinging cows in this 60-cow barn. When we got to the third swing, my son-in-law decided we probably needed a milking parlor. During this 60-day period, he lost 75 pounds. My mother took a look at him and said, "Why don't you people come and have lunch with me?" But within 4 years, I had turned the farm over to them, and it's been their project. Bill is the numbers guy, loves it, loves managing the numbers, predicting, and that kind of thing. And Bets is the one who's passionate about the cows. She's managed to breed us a herd of 500 that averages rolling average of 32,000 milk, 4.3 fat, and 3.2 protein. And that's not a bad thing to do in 20 years.
What's the cow at Brigeen look like today? Describe a cow.
Medium size, tremendous strengths, got to be able to compete in a group of 100.
It's great advice, and you've gotten there. And Peggy, I've watched it. And Steve, so many of us can't get out of the way of the next generation. What forced you to get out of the way? Maybe Mary?
No. I knew I wasn't smart enough to take it to the next level. At that level, you got to be able to manage money. My passion is taking care of cows, not managing money and managing details. They're the next generation. Bill loves the details. Betsy loves the cows.
And so it was a natural progression for you and your family.
It was easy for me.
It made it easy.
And they agreed to take care of me if I gave them the farm. So that was a done deal.
So are you loving life today? You still get to be involved with those cows you love?
They don't let me work. They take me along to shows like this.
Best decision you ever made?
Sure is.
What? If you could do one more thing in this industry, is there something that you'd like to accomplish in the next 30, 40 years?
Just keep encouraging young people. I hear so much bad-mouthing about the industry, but boy, if you come out here and see the young cows and the number of young people working in the barn and the numbers they had for the junior show the other day, if you don't get high on that, they better nail the cover shut.
Oh, and on that note, Steve, I can't think of a better way to wrap up this conversation and the time that we've had with you to share your story and this incredible wisdom from your years of experience.
Well, Peggy, it has been fun, and Steve, we thank you. You're one of my mentors and an iconic breeder, and it's been so great just to have. Our listeners are going to love this. They're going to listen to the stories about the Showbox.
Yes, the stories of the Showbox. And Tim, as you and I wrap up our conversations together today as well, there have been a couple of really strong themes that I've been hearing, and I wonder if you're hearing them too, but one of them is definitely about mentorship, and it's a multifaceted mentorship that goes forward and back. And you've heard that too today, haven't you?
Maybe the most profound thing for me in these series of interviews has been mentorship and leadership, and iconic leaders don't have to come from somebody the next generation above. They can come the generation, and almost every person, Peggy, to a T, has credited the younger generation, people younger than them. That's
sure
great
have.
stories.
They sure have, and to build off that as well, another thing that I think we've heard too is really the ability to hone in on the things that you do well and surround yourself with really good people that can add to the other areas. Steve just shared that with the way that that's progressed Brigeen Farms. We heard that from Jim and John and how that has allowed them to go from a 100 cow stanchion barn almost 30 years ago to multi-site dairy operation, as well as genetics and the dairy goat business. And that was a common theme for them too. And same thing, Tom Morris said it as well, right? Tom Morris said it when he sat in that chair too. And he said that is what allowed him, was surrounding himself with good people and letting them do what they were good at.
Absolutely. And as we've talked about the Showbox, the great thing about this collaboration, your podcasts from Up Level bring people information that can make you better managers, better people, better leaders. Showbox Sires, we are focused on trying to develop the next great cow and the next great bull because of the passion we all have for this cow, and not just the cow, but the people in this business. So I think this has been a magical collaboration that put it all together.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you, Tim, thank you for sitting on the Showbox with me today for the Up Level Dairy podcast and our collaboration with Showbox Sires.
We hope you've enjoyed this special collaboration between Showbox Sires and the Up Level Dairy Podcast, filmed at World Dairy Expo to bring you Showbox stories from the greats. If you like these episodes, make sure to reach out and let us know, and we'd be happy to provide more of these stories to you. And make sure you check out the links in our show notes to Showbox Sires, and make sure you're following the Up Level Dairy Podcast. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and thanks for listening today.